Camera's going, mic's going, everything's good?
Are we streaming?
Okay. All right. We'd like to welcome you to our Riverdale City Council meeting for Tuesday, December 7th, 2021. Let the record show that all city council members are present. We have Councilor Stevens joining us electronically. We'd like to excuse the mayor at this time. We also have members of the city staff here and a member of the public, soon to be city council. Also, we welcome her. We have asked Mr. Cody Carden to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Everybody rise, put their hands over their hearts and repeat after me.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Mr. Carden. So Mayor Searle had planned on being here tonight, and he apologized that he couldn't, but he had written up something for our moment of silence, and I told him that I would be happy to read it. And so this is from Mayor Searle. 80 years ago today, on December 7th, 1941, the Imperial Japanese Navy launched a sneak attack on the U.S. naval base located at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. The attack occurred at 8 a.m. on a Sunday morning when many of our military force was sleeping. The Japanese attack consisted of 353 aircraft launched from 6 aircraft carriers located north of the Hawaiian Islands. During the surprise attack, some 2,403 U.S. personnel, including 83 civilians, were killed, while another 1,143 were wounded. 19 U.S. Navy ships, including 8 battleships, were damaged or destroyed. When the attack occurred, the United States was not at war with Japan and had remained neutral in World War II. The U.S. entered the war the next day when Congress approved a declaration of war against Japan. President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, when announcing the attack, which occurred without any formal warning and while peace negotiations with Japan were ongoing, declared that it would be a date that would live in infamy, and it truly has been. And this is the 80th anniversary here, and may we now take a moment of silence as we remember the lives lost, those wounded, and the destruction caused that unforgettable December morning. Thank you. And thank you, Mayor Searle, for writing that tribute. We now would like to open up a time of public comment. This is an opportunity to address the City Council regarding any concerns or ideas. No action will be taken during this time. Please try to limit your comments to 3 minutes. Seeing none, we will move on to presentation and reports. We do not have a mayor's report for today. City Council assignments. Would anyone like to report on their City Council assignments? Okay. Seeing none, Mayor Searle had also asked Mr. Eggett to give us a community development report.
I'm just going to go off of the document you had in your December 10th packet, just the projects that are listed, give you a quick update on those items. As you all know, the Raising Cane's ribbon cutting grand opening is still scheduled for January 11th. Knock on wood. We hope it continues. They are moving forward with that, and that will be at 8:30 a.m. There'll be a kind of a brief celebration before for friends and family as well. That will be announced at a later date. Joe's Car Connection, they're working on the building interior. If you're not familiar where that is, that's over by the Cherokee Apartments. It's the old paint store. That's where that's going in for fleet sales. It's an expansion site of his. I think it's an expansion site of his Roy location, and he may at some point relocate there, but that's what that is. Spark Studios, they're progressing along. They're there next to Crumble Cookies. And that's another studio salon business, kind of like the one we have over here in the H&P building, the crossing that they have there. And the Maverick building permit has been issued for the Maverick location up on 1450 in Riverdale Road. And then Cheddar Scratch Kitchen, we're anticipating them coming before the council for the December 21st meeting for final approval consideration. That's at least the plan they submitted today. So hopefully staff comments will be good and that'll be ready to come forward for final consideration at that point. Take 5, they're an oil change business. We anticipate them coming before the council on the January 4th meeting for final consideration. At that time, they will be coming with a fizz drink shop as well on that site. So there's something, if you have someone in your family that likes fizz, Riverdale's getting a fizz. So there you go. And then finally, Chick-fil-A, their remodel and site redesign is still scheduled to commence in spring, with the delay, obviously, of not getting ready in the winter in time for that. So that's all I have, unless you have any questions for me.
I had one question. Sometimes we have not had the second meeting in December. I was just wondering how time sensitive the Cheddar's Scratch Kitchen approval is.
It's pretty sensitive if you ask the Cheddar's corporate leadership. They're very anxious. In fact, I had a discussion today and they scrapped some of the issues. They scrapped other plans they had and issues associated with those plans in order to try to make sure they hit this meeting to satisfy the engineer and the public works director. So
Okay.
that they're very desirous. We'll just put it that way.
Okay. That's good to know.
Mr. Eggett has been threatened with his jaw for setting that thing
Numerous times.
numerous times, and he's not budging on this thing. But I want you to know that I've been fighting for you, so, as well as ourselves.
Well, if it must be, right? So, okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anything else?
Nope.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll now move on to consent items. We have 2 tonight. The first one is a consideration to approve the meeting minutes from the November 3rd council work session and also the November 3rd city council meeting. Is there any corrections or changes to those minutes?
Move to approve.
Okay, well, actually,
Oh, that move to approve the consent items.
okay, hold up just one second. We're going to do a second consent item and then I'll get you to your motion.
Okay.
Okay, the second one is a consideration to approve the 2022 annual city council calendar. Hopefully you all had a chance to look at that. And that will be our meeting schedule for the coming year. Those are the 2 consent items. And at this point, we would need a motion to approve those.
Go ahead, Alan.
Oh, it's your motion.
I'm teasing.
Counselor Hilton. You still want to have a motion to approve the
Yes,
consent?
move
Okay,
to
we have
approve
a
the consent items.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Counselor Hilton and a second by Counselor Ellis.
I just-
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, it looks like those are approved unanimously. We'll now move on to our action items. Number 1, consideration to approve Ordinance 940 for clarification on appeal board process. Mr. Brooks.
Thank you. As I mentioned in the pre-planning meeting, these go hand in hand. One's just an ordinance and one's a resolution. So in dealing with Ordinance 940, they're both saying the same thing. They're just going into different places. And the whole idea is that we clarify that a little bit to make sure it's real clear that any contract employees fall under these policies as well. Even though our is based upon the previous city administrator, he is an appointed employee, so it still picks him up, but we want to make real clear so there's no gray area in there. So that's what it is. They're both housekeeping matters and quite simple. Even though they look a little bit different, it's just because of where they go and the language we used, and we just plugged that word in there. So that's what it is.
Okay, we will do them as 2 separate items. Is there any questions on action item 1, Ordinance 940? If not, then we would need a motion. Mr. Counselor Arnold?
Move to approve resolution 2021-27 as stated within the packet.
Let's back up and do the ordinance 940.
Oh,
Sorry.
One of those nights, Alan.
yeah. Move to approve ordinance 940 as stated within the packet.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, ordinance 940 passes unanimously. Now we will move on to action item number 2. This is the resolution where we amend the personnel policies handbook. Do you have anything else to add,
Oh,
Mr.
same
Brooks?
thing. We just added the language in the personnel policy.
Okay, and with that, A motion would be in order. Counselor Ellis.
Approve Resolution 2021-20-27, making amendments to the Personnel Policy Handbook, Policy 7-2, predetermination hearing.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and second. Any discussion on the motion? All right. Ms. Maragoni, will you poll the council, please?
What's that?
You are last on this one.
See? Told you.
Aye.
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 All right. Looks like it passes unanimously. Thank you. We'll now move on to item number 3, consideration to approve Resolution 2021-28, establishing a process for a midterm vacancy for mayor or council. Mr. Brooks.
Thank you. We haven't done this, at least not this procedure, since I've been here. So at least in the last 18, 20 years, this has never happened, but it will this year. The day that Braden takes his position as sworn as mayor, his seat comes open at that moment. And so we have to go through the process of filling that seat. Where we didn't have anything in place, I thought it might be good, and we can place this in our council rules and procedures towards the end of that. We'll place that in there so it's permanently in there. But this is following state code. I think it's as tight as it can get. I don't think we've made any mistakes. There's just a couple of things in there that I wanted to bounce off of you. And if you look in subparagraph E and F, when we vote, all the state code says is that we vote. It doesn't say how or whatever. We propose that we do it by a ballot. And by doing that, I'm just a little bit concerned because we're going to have a lot of people in here who are going to put a little bit of time into this, and you guys are going to interview them. And I didn't want to make it an embarrassing process for them. And I mean, if they get no votes, and maybe they wouldn't care, but I was thinking about that. We can really do it either way. I mean, the cities are all over the place on how they do this, but I thought by doing it by ballot, and we still save it and we record those so we have them, it's still a matter of public record, so it's open, and if people wanted to access it, it'd be available to them. So that part I would suggest you leave it unless you're just uncomfortable with it and don't want to and want to do it by vocal vote. I don't care either way. That's up to you. The only other thing I would say on this is in paragraph 2, on the second vote, it states, and this again is following state code, the 2 individuals having the highest number of votes after the first vote is who we vote on. But that's not going to happen. I mean, realistically, we could have more than 2 individuals. And so my proposal would be that we strike the word 2 and just have it read the individuals having the highest number of votes, because that's realistically what's going to happen. And then you might have, like some of the things we talked about before, where we have 4 people voting, we could have a 2-1-1 after the first vote. And then in the second vote, it might be the same way, but we're fine on that. I don't know how we would distinguish the 2 highest individuals when 2 of them are tied. Then we got to add in a whole new section that's not in the code. So I don't know why they put that in there. It's a little bit weird, but we can leave it, however, but we would have to deal with that situation, which the state code doesn't address. So that's why my thought is let's just strike it out, because if we strike it, we're still following state code. The 2 highest people are moving on. It just might be 3, and it could be 4 if we had a 1-1-1-1 vote. And then at that point, we'd go to a second vote, and it could again be a 1-1-1-1, and then we go to the lot. So we're still following state code. It's just that that's how it should be written.
Counselor Arnold.
It'd be anybody with a vote.
Yes.
Because if you looked at it, if you was 3-1,
Right.
2-1-1,
Right.
1-1-1-1,
Right.
So it's anybody that receives a vote in the first ballot moves to the second.
Unless it was a 4-0.
Unanimous.
Right.
Or a 2-2 with
4-0.
just 3 people, maybe. Or
Well, anybody that received a vote would move forward.
right.
Yes.
Unless it was 4-0.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of weird because we wrote this up, and I woke up this morning thinking about that. I have no idea. This job's getting out of hand when I'm dreaming about ordinances, And I thought we didn't think about those contingencies. So I sat down with Michelle this afternoon. We looked at it. And I said, I think the easiest solution is just strike that word 2 and pass it as is.
So if you had maybe a 5-person council voting on a mayor replacement or something, you could have some different
Right.
variations.
Right.
Maybe. So
Right. And
So-
this does apply to the mayor as well, if
So-
that happened to him or her.
Yeah. But the most you could have is 4 people make it to the second round, and I think that's
Yeah.
reasonable.
And it still follows the process. We're not violating the state code. That's why I'm saying let's just do it. That's how it should read in the state code, but it doesn't. We followed state code when we wrote that out. But it's up to you if you want to leave it. I don't care. I'm just saying I think it's cleaner. So
Reasonable.
Any questions
Nope.
or comments? Okay.
So just to say on our second vote, if we get 2-1-1, then the 2 persons in.
right,
Okay.
you have a
don't to
winner.
go-
If you have a majority, that winner will go.
Okay.
The only way it moves into the lots is if there's a tie.
So that wording for our motion, do we need to add that wording to our motion, or is it already in here? Like, I think we have to change that. Didn't you include the
Have to
2?
strike the
It's
word.
in there. I would
We gotta
pass it with
strike.
that one deletion
word
in there.
two.
Right. That's what I would do.
What paragraph's that in?
It's in paragraph F. The 2 individuals. That's how it starts off. Just have it read the individuals. Strike the word 2.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. With that, a motion would be in order. Council Arnold.
Move to approve resolution 2021-28 with one change in paragraph F that says on the second vote, the 2 individuals, the word 2 being stricken. So the individuals having the highest votes. We
That's
say
on the
highest
first
votes or
vote. The
both?
first vote, right?
It's
paragraph
they
F.
come out. It's referring to the first
Is
vote.
it a other F?
No, that's the one.
That's
You're
the-
right.
yeah.
It's right there.
It just says, okay,
Just strike the word 2.
striking
Second
the word
that.
2.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Did you get those? That's Councilor Arnold and then Councilor Hilton with the second. Okay. Any discussion on the motion? Ms. Maragoni, will you poll the council?
Councilmember Stevens.
Aye.
Councilmember Ellis.
Aye.
Councilmember Arnold.
Aye.
Councilmember Mitchell.
Aye.
Councilmember Goodman.
Aye.
All right.
And what we will do that night, we will swear in Ms. Hanson, so she will be voting. This will apply to her, so this will be new for everybody, especially to her, but she will be that 4th vote. So
Oh,
Just a weird question. We always do pictures of the council. Do that on the second week. Second
would.
meeting.
I would.
Have
After
a
we
full
swear in the
council.
new guy. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
yeah, that'll be interesting because we usually do some pictures of the swearing in and stuff too. So I guess we'll have pictures both weeks.
Well, we'll
Lots
have
of
a second
pictures.
swearing in that second meeting
Yeah, we
as
will,
well.
yeah.
We'll do the first one still because we have to do that, but
We'll swear him in right at that meeting.
Swear in every week.
We'll swear him in at that second meeting.
we'll swear him in right after the vote. That's what the state law says. We are to swear him in immediately, so that's what we will do.
Okay. You okay with all that, Bart? Mr. or Counselor Stevens? Okay. Very good. Okay, that passed unanimously. We'll move on to action item number 4. Discussion of parks facility rename and consideration to approve resolution 2021-29 establishing a memorial project and donation policy. Mr. Brooks.
Thank you. I see that Mr. Douglas is here. I ask all the department heads to be here tonight because I think that next part is kind of important for all of us, and they needed to hear that and see what happens. But he is here, and as I led into this in the work meeting, we have not had a chance to sit down. I know he's got some concerns about this. He's given me a list of things. So ideally, but I told you I'd have something, and so it's here. It's something for you to look at and consider if you want to go that route. I don't think it's time sensitive, so I would I would ask that you table this, to be honest with you, to give me a little bit more time to meet with Sean on this, because it applies. I mean, his department has to deal with this, so it's important that he has some input on it.
Do we have any questions, or what do people think about this?
I'm not until.
Move to table.
Yeah.
Okay, we have a motion to table by Counselor Hilton and a second by Counselor Arnold. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No, it looks like it passes unanimously. All right, yeah, I don't think there's a rush on that. Let's get it right.
Thank you.
I like where you're headed. I like a lot of it, but we want to make sure you get it how you want it. All right, item number.
See you though, Sean.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
I got something for you later.
What's that?
In the meeting.
Okay, we'll move on to item number 5. Presentation and discussion regarding municipal energy sales and use tax and municipal telecommunications license tax. That'll be presented by Cody Carden and Fred Philpott. Mr. Carden.
Mr. Chair, would it be possible to take a little bit of a break here? Fred hasn't signed in. He knew at 10 after, so he may be having problems getting signed in. If we could just take a little break
Yeah.
and see if we can't find him and see what's going on, because we haven't heard anything, but he knows, he's aware of it, and we've communicated with him numerous times. So,
Go to comments.
and we were
He has signed in earlier about 20.
yeah,
about
we don't
half
know what's
hour
going
ago.
on, but
He came on
he had
briefly and then-
anticipated, we had anticipated him leading with this to give a little bit of background information before Cody went. So I'd prefer to keep in that order if we can. So if you can just buy us a little bit of time.
We do comments.
Do we want to do comments right now while we wait, or is that are you guys gonna be busy working on that?
I think we could go ahead on the comments. I don't have any issues with that part of it.
Okay. We'll jump down to item H, comments. We'll start with comments from the city council. Councilor Arnold?
So I have one comment. I was contacted by a resident and she wanted me to express her appreciation for the tree over on the roundabouts and how wonderful it looks over there. Especially to Sean.
One special resident over there, and she was excited to have one.
Yeah, no, she that person wanted me to thank you personally. So
Christmas lights look great. It's great to have the decorations up for this season for Christmas.
And you know what? As a resident and a council member, and as we drive through there, she's happy as can be. So I thank you too.
Happy wife, happy life.
Amen, brother.
Any other comments from the city council? Okay. How about the city staff? Any comments?
I don't know that we have anything further. I was actually going to have Mike do his report there if it wasn't on the earlier one. So unless the department heads are here, we've been meeting extensively on a couple of things, one of which is the next proposals that we have. So I asked them to be prepared if you guys had any questions or things you wanted to talk to them about. So they are here and they're prepared. So if you want to drill them, that's what they get paid the big bucks for. So it looks like I've stalled enough that we got Fred
Just
here.
enough. So, all right. Now it
I'm
looks like
scaring
we're
the
ready to-
department heads out there. Now they're freaking out. But
Yeah.
no, I don't think it'll be that big a deal. We didn't anticipate bringing them in. Some of this stuff, I mean, we want to talk about these things and approach it. But as far as the particulars of that, assuming that this goes forward and you pass this, we still don't even know how much money we're going to bring in. We got an idea, but it would be almost impossible to even budget for that right now. But we do anticipate that come February, when we meet with you on the strategic planning kind of stuff, that they'd be heavily involved in at that point, especially our public safety and Sean's department as well, because those are some of the ones that we're really concerned about right now because of not just the environment, but the other cities that we're competing against. It used to be that Riverdale was the one that outbid everybody on these jobs, and we're finding ourselves either in the middle or on the bottom of the pack right now, and it's very concerning. And we've expressed that to you previously and made some of those temporary patches. But come February, we've got to look at some other things, and that's why we thought this was pretty important. I want to make sure they were all here. So,
Okay. We will get started with item number 5. Presentation and discussion of regarding the municipal energy sales and use tax and municipal telecommunications license tax. Mr. Carden.
Okay, thank you. We'll turn the time over to Fred to get going, and he's got a presentation, and then I'll kind of follow up. And either of us, we're happy to answer questions as we go. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask them. So.
Alrighty, thank you for having me. Can everyone hear me? Perfect. I'm going to share my screen here. See if I can get this presentation up. Alrighty. Are you able to see now my presentation as well?
Yes.
Alrighty. So Cody asked me to present kind of a refresher on the work that we've been doing in the past with regards to the financial plan and the evaluation of sustainability over time. So I'll go through our objectives as we completed that study and what our ultimate findings were, and really how that ties into the public hearings that you have on your agenda this evening. But when we do these plans, we've worked with several communities across the state, evaluating the general fund and determining sustainability. This isn't a new practice, and it has been utilized more frequently when we look at enterprise funds and determining rates and sustainability within our enterprise funds. But because the general fund is it's kind of a melting pot of revenues and expenses and a catch-all for everything else, it hasn't received the attention maybe that it should, but that's changing. So many entities are looking at the general fund and making sure we're looking at sustainability. And how we do that is really there's three elements that we evaluate. We look at prioritization, which is an evaluation of existing services. We look at efficiency, which is how we control those services over time. And then we look at revenue sustainability. The first two items, prioritization and efficiency, usually require a little bit more outside of our scope and involve your role as legislators and council members to prioritize services and look at what your community wants to be or become. We can help come in and look at revenue sustainability and evaluate those services and build models that evaluate scenarios, which is what we've helped the city do. But those are kind of the three components when we look at sustainability and developing these models. The problem really that's been identified as we look at the general fund, and it has to do with how the general fund is structured, but really there's a loss of buying power over time, and there's level of service or growth issues that are challenging to address based on how the general fund receives revenue. Primarily that's driven, this issue is driven by the certified tax rate and that formula, and the fact that the certified tax rate is designed to be budget neutral. So you don't get an increase in revenue, for example, for inflation or appreciation in property. What you do get is if you have new growth, which is new bricks and mortar, you'll capture new revenue for that. But typically there's a service issue associated with that new growth. So you have to expand your service in order to handle, in most cases, that new growth. But a common misunderstanding is that as property appreciates, that the general fund will get more revenue, but that's not the case because the certified tax rate will adjust downward based on appreciation. Now, cities do benefit, whereas other states are harmed, for example, during recessions. Utah has a better system in those regards, in that you don't lose revenue if property depreciates in value or you see a loss in value. But again, the issue is within the general fund, it's challenging to mitigate that loss of buying power and the changes in levels of service or growth through the revenues that are available to the general fund. So what entities do, we look at proactively evaluating those revenues. We think of them as levers, of what levers we can control and what levers we can't control. And the idea is to focus on the levers we can control while looking at all of the other factors within the general fund with regards to capital infrastructure, operations and maintenance, unfunded operations, those types of things, with the primary objective to look at diversifying that tax base. It's like any investment strategy. The more diverse it is, the less risk you have from substantial impacts from market swings, for example. So that's one of the primary objectives of these studies, is to look at ensuring that we're diverse and we have the ability to control those levers, and that we're not reliant on maybe one specific element or too reliant. I mean, it's not every community is the same. There's a different proportionality for every community with regards to revenues and where those come from. But we're just trying to make sure that there's a diversity there. And all of that should be centered on the strategic plan, that we're actually developing a plan rather than letting the environment dictate what we do. We create a plan that and a series of actions or steps that we can take to help control that future rather than letting it control us. So process-wise, what we did is we met back in 2019 with department heads and reviewed revenues, expenditures, the capital improvement needs, and then we built a model based on all that data that we collected. We presented that model in the 2019 budget retreat. We then provided an update in 2020 and in 2021. Really, those updates were minor. We were just looking at updating based on more current budget and inputs, basically. We're updating the inputs to that model. But ultimately, the dilemma hasn't really changed, right? As Riverdale has a unique issue that you're facing with regards to your revenue sustainability over time, that really all the other communities that I work with don't have this issue, and that's the hold harmless issue with regards to your sales tax. And the magnitude of that and the timing of that creates some challenges. Now, magnitude obviously it's a big number with regards to revenue, potential lost revenue, but timing is also an issue because really there's a perception that there's a lot of time before that issue will be upon us, but relatively speaking, there's really not a lot of time to take action, and if you want to, in essence, promote scenarios that are maybe easier to swallow rather than just kind of ripping the Band-Aid off when the problem is on our doorstep. So that magnitude and timing creates a unique dilemma for the city, and how do we address that? So we looked at kind of some action items, and again, using this tool to help us evaluate that. Really, the issue is costs are going up, including public safety salaries, and 2030 is really around the corner. There's also additional adjustments that may happen with regards to sales tax that the state is considering, so that keeps coming up in the legislature. All of that really points to an imbalanced revenue stream for the city, and what do we do about that? Here's the findings of that. So in essence, again, out in that year 10, we were showing that loss of revenue, and that was creating that challenge that our expenditures would now exceed our revenue resources as a result of lost sales tax and lost buying power, meaning that inflationary impact could outpace our natural growth in revenues. And so those combined factors created this dilemma. And then what happens without any change, you can use your fund balances. So municipalities are allowed to keep a certain amount of operating expense in the form of a fund balance that carries over each year. So you would have that available, but it wouldn't be enough to mitigate that lost revenue. And you would see here that we would go into the negative and it would continue to go down. So that was really the issue. And the really why I was engaged to look at this is to start looking at what are the impacts and how do we address that. So that's a pretty quick crash course on financial sustainability plans. Our conclusions from this were, again, if we don't create or look at new revenue resources within the general fund, that it would continue to be strained and that we would go critical in the future. In addition, the capital projects that were proposed or being evaluated, that would deplete the CIP fund balance, and so there's additional issue with regards to your capital improvement fund. Now there's some flexibility there. Obviously, that goes back to prioritization. meaning what projects do we want to fund, what are considered critical versus maybe increased levels of service or preference projects. So those were some recommendations that obviously we'd have to reevaluate future projects as we evaluate revenue resources. And depending on what tools are utilized, that may change the nature of what you can build and how you might be able to change your level of service. And then in addition, the city will need to continue to watch the legislative changes and how those will impact the city, because those will have potential impacts on your revenue disproportionately to other communities, right? So based on that hold harmless issue. So those were outcomes and recommendations from that process, which then ties into what Cody is and the discussion items for this evening, which are the other tax options that could be available to you as a community that may not be, aren't being utilized right now as a revenue resource. And so ultimately, our conclusion is there may not be one tool that's going to solve your problem because of the nature or that magnitude, again, of this issue. In order to solve this problem, you may need to look to diversify. How do we utilize all the tools that are in your toolbox to make sure that you're prepared when 2030 comes around, those changes are implemented on the city. So, Cody, anything else you wanted me to address before we go into your materials?
I don't think so. Do you guys have any questions for Fred? No? No questions?
Gloomy.
Okay. Well, and just as a refresher, thank you so much, Fred. The reason that originally we brought Fred in is we just wanted to make sure we weren't missing anything, that we hadn't forgot something, or there wasn't an easy fix. And as you can see, he's kind of reached the same conclusions that we have internally. So I've got some materials there in the packet. I'll reference the page numbers in the packet, kind of like I always do. And I don't know, Michelle, maybe she can take back the presentation and then she can share the packet too, so you can see them on the screens. So we're going to start on page 40 of the packet. So this graph is kind of the inverse of one that Fred showed, and I brought most of the materials that we talked about in September just kind of to refresh everybody's memory, because we went over this fairly in depth at that time. But it's a graph, it looks like this, of our sales tax, and you can see for a long time we were running along just fine, and then in 2005 and 6 when they reallocated our sales tax, you can see that in 2006 we kind of peak and then we started to drop, and they implemented that Senate Bill 35 subsidy that was the hold harmless provision, and that's the green part on your chart. And you can see that we really didn't have any growth, or very little, in that years, because as we collected more, then the hold harmless decreased. And so the only increase we got was in that 0.2% sales tax. And if you remember, that was in about 2007 that the State Tax Commission, or I guess really the legislature, allowed us to do that. And we captured like 100% of that local option sales tax. And so that was the only growth that we got, and the economy was recovering, and so we didn't see much. And so at that point, some of those things were going to expire, and they actually let us expand or keep the hold harmless for a little longer to help keep us whole, because we weren't recovering as fast as originally anticipated. And so you can see that amount continues to grow. If you go to the next chart, so that'll be on page 41. We'll wait just a second for Michelle to get it pulled up there, so you can see. If she scrolls down just a tiny bit, you can see on the bottom there, so the blue is what we've collected on that local option, that 0.2, and then you can see in 2031 that we collect nothing. So the bad part is as our problem continues to grow, as inflation occurs and sales go up, and then we collect nothing. And so and then you can see, you could see Fred's chart and how like our loss just goes down, and that's because we lose that. The next page, we talked about property taxes, if you remember, and so that's page 42 of the packet. You can see the city's historical property tax rates and the rates of other entities and kind of how we compare. And I tried to, if you remember, to equalize these because every entity is different. They use different people to provide their public safety. And so, like, I live in Far West personally, and you can see I pay more to the fire district than I pay to the city. But in combined, my equalized property tax, I think Far West ends up like number 7 of the Weber County entities. And anyways, that's what we were trying to show there. And then on the next page, you can see this is the actual breakdown of a home in Riverdale. Because a lot of times, I think you guys hopefully understand this by now. But
Sorry.
go ahead.
Can we go back just one page? I had
Sure.
a quick question. So I was a little confused about the top part of that graph. I thought it was supposed to hold about steady on the certified tax rate. Why is it dropping to 97, 92? I would expect it to hold about 130.
Okay, so as Fred alluded to, our property tax structure in Utah is different than a lot of other entities. And like in and we don't need to get into other states and stuff, but they're all a little different. How Utah works is we're guaranteed an amount of money. So as home values increase, which you can see that's happened the last few years, the tax rate decreases because we don't need as much to get. So say like before we were collecting about $700,000 in property tax. So as your home value goes up to get us the $700,000, we need less. And so that rate drops to offset that. It guarantees us an amount of money, not a rate.
I get that, but the tax amount has dropped drastically.
And that's because those home values have went up drastically. And so per every $100 of assessed value,
Okay, all right. Okay.
the tax rate
Okay.
changes. And so we can actually pull up somebody's house if you want, and I can show you, like it's all public record on the Weber County parcel search, the breakdown each year. So even though that rate's dropped, like the amount that you pay to the city would remain fairly consistent.
Okay.
Now-
So that's because the house value is not going up, is why that value is going down. I was just confused about the actual dollars that were collected.
Right.
But the dollars would still be the same.
At the end of
Because
the
the house-
day.
yeah, okay.
Yeah. So
should've
I can,
picked that up.
if you want to see a little bit more, I can show you.
No, I got
but,
it. I should have picked that up.
But basically, that's what happens. As the home values go up, we need a smaller percentage to gather 700,000, and so that rate. So what the county basically does is they come in and they look at it and they say, okay, we value all of your houses, and then they say, okay, well, the city needs $700,000. So they have your value, they have the other value, and then they just plug in the rate to make those equal out, and then that's what the tax is.
Yeah, and I knew the rate went down. I just couldn't figure out why. But so we get about 700,000 is what we get on that.
Yeah, this year it went up because we've had so much growth in like Coleman
houses,
Farms and stuff. So we're getting like 740,000 ish.
But isn't there a way that we can freeze that rate?
So we have to go through. The problem is in Utah, if you want to adjust your rate up at all, you have to go through truth and taxation. And so, not that that's a bad thing or anything. There's been articles on KSL and various places about how the legislature's almost made that so hard that a lot of people haven't been doing it. It's not so hard. It's just a lot of public insight and things. And I actually printed out, I guess we won't be able to show Briar. There's one in the copier if you want to pull it up. But it's called fiscal year, that one you're on right there. So these are the regulation, or these are like kind of the timeline. This is what you have to do to go through truth and taxation. And so basically you have to decide, and the earlier we decide, the better. But on or before the June 22nd, we'd have to make the decision that we're going to go through truth and taxation. And then we have to hold these various hearings within a required timeline, and then we hold a final hearing usually in August, around August 17th, and then we would get our new rate as long as everyone voted for it and did those things. So it's just a lot of work because we have to send out notices, we have to contact the county, but it's not anything we can't do. But that's why a lot of entities don't do it. So you're exactly right, Councillor Ellis. What a lot of our neighbors have been doing, South Ogden, is they have froze their rate. So they go through truth and taxation every year, and they keep that rate the same. So what that does for them is as house values go up, they collect more. And so basically what it does is it allows them an inflationary adjustment in their property tax so that they're not losing ground. Because as Fred alluded to, we're basically, every year that we don't go through truth and taxation, we are losing ground on our property tax because inflation's going up and we're collecting the same, so we can buy less with that amount of money.
What do
And
the
so
other cities in the county do for that? Is the Terrace the only one that froze their rate?
So almost all, not all of them, but a lot of them have. Our neighbors, the Terrace has, South Ogden has. I think the Terrace has got where they do it like every other year. South Ogden's tax rate is actually, I believe, higher than Ogden's tax rate now, if you can believe that. And it's because they have continued to do this every year, where if you look on this chart, you can see that Ogden does it, but they've been doing it like every 2 or 3 years. And so they've lost ground to the to South Ogden. But a lot of these entities have started doing that. Now, why we haven't been able to do that is because we live on our sales tax. So as long as the economy is okay, if you go back to this first graph, as that blue line is going up, we're getting that inflationary adjustment. However, come 2030, we'll have less money that we're getting that inflationary adjustment over. And so that's where like the property tax is one of those tools that we have to adjust it. Are you okay? Does that make sense? Any questions there? It's really confusing, like property taxes. So if you have any questions, please don't hesitate. So if you could go to the next page, Michelle. So like the other thing that's confusing is, so this home, and I forgot to write down their total tax amount. I want to say it was like $2,200. This is a house in Riverdale. So you can see, and this is where it gets confusing too, because, you know, most of the residents will say, well, I paid $2,200 in tax, but you can see all the different entities and line items that goes to. So yes, they pay $2,200 in property tax, but of that, Riverdale City got about 9% at $145. So I just ran some calculations just to give you guys some information tonight. So on the prior page, the last time that we went through truth and taxation or had a property tax increase was back in 2011. The rate at that time was 0.001307. Our current tax rate is 0.000848. So if we raised our property tax rate back up to that 0.001307, that would be a 54% tax increase. So what does that mean to this house? So if she goes back to that page, if we increase that property tax rate, so this house was valued in 2021 for $312,000. If you remember, if it's your primary residence, you get a 45% deduction on property tax. So you only pay 55% of the market value. And so that the tax value, because it's a primary residence, is $171,600. So if we times that by the 0.001307, that would be $224.28, or it'd be an increase of just under $80, or about $7 a month. So if we times that, our total market value for the whole city is about $882 million. So if we times that new rate by that versus our current rate, we would collect about $405,000 extra with a 54% property tax increase. So the problem is, like this, you know, the standard, their headline isn't going to say your property taxes are going up $80. It's going to say Riverdale proposes a 54% property tax increase. So, and you can see, so for a resident, for about $7 a month, we're going to gather about $405,000. And that includes commercial and everything we have in the city right now. Okay. So that's kind of a summary of property tax. That's where we'd be at. Now, Right now we're collecting about 1.5 million, 1.7 million of that local option. So you can see like that property tax rate wouldn't even, that'd be about a third of what we'd need, maybe a little less than that. So that gets us to telecommunication and energy tax. So if you can go to the next page. Yeah.
So what happens when you have the ancillary unit, you have the rental, so it's your primary resident, but you have somebody living in your basement? Do they declare that? Do we?
Does the county know?
Usually not, and it's still their primary residence, so we would still just get the 55% of the assessed value.
Okay.
And that's a great question. So like apartment units, because they're owned by a management company, we would get 100% of the market value. Commercial would get 100% of the market value. So we gather more from them than we would do from personal residences. But, you know, like in our city, I think the vast majority of the single family dwellings are probably personal residences. So proportionately, we're going to tax businesses less or more, and residences less just because they get that 45% deduction. Any other questions? Okay, and I've thrown a ton at you. So this next one, the telecommunication and energy tax analysis. So every other city in Weber County is doing this now. Far West, if you look, they have $0 coming in. They approved this in July of this year, I believe. And so by the time they got their paperwork and everything turned in, it looks like as of January 1st, it will start to be assessed in Far West. So my analysis, so how, and I think a lot of your questions was, well, how does this impact people? What does this do? What does this look like? So if we can scroll down just a little bit there at the bottom, and I only calculated for residences, and we did go over this in September, but I'll go over it again really quick and show you some more detail. I have no idea how much power Home Depot uses. I have no idea how many cell phones they have. So it's hard to estimate what we're going to collect from them. But a resident, it's a little easier to estimate because we're all fairly similar, right? So you can see there, and usually how telecom works is it is aimed more at like phone services. So a lot of entities have actually seen a decrease in it where people are going away from landlines and things like that. And so that's why I have on there $10 a month for a phone bill. And I averaged 2 phone bills, I think. And so that would cost the average resident, let's say 70 cents a month. And so how this works is if we go to page 53, and you don't need to go there, I'll read it. Basically how it works, and this is from the code, is we're allowed to charge 3.5% telecommunications based upon the provider's gross receipts. So they go in, and I can show you if you'd like the tax return that they file. And basically what it is it's a tax return. It's an Excel spreadsheet, and you list, so Riverdale City, we had $50,000 worth of revenue or gross receipts. West Haven, we had 57,000, and then it calculates the tax based upon that. So like we would collect the telecom tax from T-Mobile, from Verizon, from those type of companies, and then they have the ability in state code, it talks about it on page 3, that they can then pass this tax if they want onto their customers. And so then that's how the residents get taxed. So you can see there's my breakdown. I came up with an estimate of $9 per month that they would pay. And that generates about $300,000 worth of revenue, but that's only on the residential stuff. So if we take that, we were saying $7 a month on the property tax, and we're getting $405. Now we're saying like $9 a month, and we'll likely get, and it's an estimate, but somewhere between like $600,000 and $1 million. So we get way more for about the same amount of money for the residents. And so Steve and I actually met with Larry because we wanted to make sure we weren't missing anything on this. And one of the things that he brought up is he's like, yeah, we've always liked to spread the burden of, like the services over from the not making the residents pay for the businesses, basically. And this continues to do that. It's really similar to sales tax in that regard, because those who are requiring the service, like bigger entities like America First, they're going to have a ton of telecom and they're going to pay more. And they're the ones that are, like driving on the roads more. They're using our easements. They're calling the police more, and they're utilizing our services more. Where then a personal residence, they're paying significantly less. And so it follows that historical approach that we've taken as a city. So you can see here's my estimate. That's where I came up with it. So then what I did is I reached out to some of my employees, because I live in Far West, so I don't have these taxes yet, so I couldn't pull my own bills. I looked at the cities, and some of these bills are really hard to tell, and it is very possible that depending upon the provider, that they're either already assessing them or they're not going to assess them at all. So there's several cell phone providers. Like I was looking at T-Mobile the other day, and they have a fixed fee contract now. And so you pay like $140 a month and you get 3 cell phones. And it doesn't matter where you live, it's the same. So depending on the services that our residents are participating in and pulling, it's very possible that the impact to them will be even significantly less, because there is a lot of fixed cost contracts out there now. It seems like that's more and more prevalent all the time. So you can see this top bill is a cell phone bill in a city without the tax, and then you can see that the next bill down is one that lives in a city that assesses these telecom taxes. So you can see they pay 59 cents a month on their bill, and their bill was like about $140 a month. So if you do the math, that's even less than the 3.5%. If you go to the next page, Michelle, so this is page 46 of the packet. I asked a couple other of my employees to pull bills, and so this one's from Rocky Mountain Power, and you can see they have a flat assessment there of 6%, and so that's based upon your energy tax. And so you can see that it was paying like $3.91. This accounts on equal pay, and so they're paying about $4 a month there. You can see the next one's Dominion Energy, and you can see the same thing. It's about $2.80. So that's how it would show up. The next one down, you can see this is a Verizon bill. So their billing system is a little bit different, and so they charge $20 a month for this line, and you can see they're only assessing 17 cents of this. And so because it's up to the provider, and in doing research in state code, they actually, if you read through this, they actually have the ability to assess the tax in different ways. So depending on where phone calls originate from, they can actually assess the tax there. So like I'm here at work, I use my cell phone for work. I'm making phone calls. Like if T-Mobile or whoever I utilize, it has a sophisticated enough system, according to state code, it's actually possible that they could report that portion of my bill to Riverdale rather than to Far West, because that's where the majority of the calls originate. And so in summary, we end up gathering a lot from this tax, even though it doesn't impact the residents a whole lot. And so and there's some FAQs in here that you can look at. They're on a page about 96. It's on the municipal energy tax. So you can see that it talks about like how it's levied. It's really similar, how it's levied, how it's paid. So part of that, how it's paid. So like with the municipal energy tax, so Rocky Mountain Power collects that from me, and then they bill me. So it's the month of December. So at the end of December, I get a bill from Rocky Mountain Power. I pay Rocky Mountain Power during January, right? So then at the end of January, the start of February, they would fill out their tax return with the state of Utah, send the money to the state, and then the following month, the state would send it to us. So that is one caveat, it's similar to sales tax. It takes a couple months for us to start collecting this money due to those facts. It's not like an instantaneous, we turn it on and they start sending us money right away. It takes a little bit of time to get us there. A couple other things associated with this on page 47 where Michelle is, you can see this is a monthly report we get from the State Tax Commission. And I know a lot of times we're like, we can't provide you with this information. This information is available on the State Tax Commission's website. So it's just fine. You can see this is the entities that have that city or town option distribution that was part of the hold harmless. So these are our partners in crime, if you will. So it's Murray, South Salt Lake, Naples, Vernal, and us. And if you don't know where Naples is, I didn't. It's right next to Vernal. And it's just a little town. So one of the things that we've been talking about doing and has fallen through the cracks is we talked about reaching out to these entities. So if you can go to the next page. So I've called all these entities and talked to them to kind of see what their plan was, what they're thinking, like what's their anticipation for these things. And so when I called Naples, it was kind of interesting. They have a new guy who's their city administrator, and he's like, oh, I know about that tax. And I was like, well, do you know it expires in 2030? What are you guys going to do? It expires in 2030? I'm like, yeah, it does. You probably ought to do a little research. So they have no plan. When I talked to Vernal, they knew a little bit more, but they don't have any plans either. They're just kind of like, okay, you know, like we're doing whatever. But the big players, and you can see there, I've got their budgets, their population, how much they collect from this city option, what percentage of their total general fund revenues that is, what their tax, if they have impact fees, if they do these couple taxes, when their last property tax increases, and if they have lobbyists. And it was really interesting. So talking to Murray, you can see Murray's 50,000 in population. I was kind of explaining Riverdale to their finance director, and she told me, she's like, well, we're similar, but we have 50,000 people at night and 150,000 during the day. And so they're like us, but on steroids. And their budget is about $50 million, where ours is about 12, 13 million. And so they're way bigger than us. And so I asked her, I'm like, so are you guys talking about this? What are you doing? She's like, yep, I bring it up like every other city council meeting. Every time we're talking about the budget, I bring it up. Like my council is well aware of this and we're planning for it. And I'm like, okay, well, what do you use this money for? And they use it for debt service and for their general fund. And South Salt Lake is very similar. They use it for debt service too. And come to find out, that was a lot of the reason originally these taxes were set to expire in about 2016. And Murray and South Salt Lake went into the legislature and said, we have debt tied to these and it goes till 2030. And so the legislature said, okay, we'll let you extend it till 2030. So that's how it got extended till 2030. And so talking to them more, I was like, okay, well, what are you guys' plans? And I asked them, like, do you have lobbyists? And they're like, yep, we have lobbyists. And so I started to ask the Murray City or finance director, I'm like, do you have impact fees? Yep. Do you have municipal energy? Yep. She's like, we have every tax we can. And so I'm like, okay, well, what's your plan? And so their plan is, and from talking to South Salt Lake too, there's a couple players as we've talked to our legislature members. Remember, the mayor talked about that, and they were very unfavorable. So is the league. So there's an employee at the league that is really against Riverdale and really against these taxes. And then there's also a senator that's really against them, Senator Bramble. And they both said, you know, like, we don't feel like there's any chance that we can get those as long as they're still in their positions. Now, if they retire in the next 5 years, then or maybe there's an opportunity, but if not, then, you know, it's like not even worth the time. But they assured me that they have their lobbyists working on it every year and those kind of things. So the more we've looked at it and talked to people, well, the reason that we're bringing this to you and is we've always got, and this time when we talked to Senator Milner and Representative Miles, it was like, well, what have you guys done? Well, if you look at this chart, we're the exact opposite almost of everybody. We don't have impact fees. We don't have telecom. Our property tax last increase was 2011. And so we feel like this is something that we're more than likely going to have to do before 2030, because more than likely that 0.2% is probably going away. Even talking to Larry, he agreed. He's like, I don't know that there's any chance that that's going to be extended. And so we feel like we need to we need to show them that we're trying, that we're doing stuff. And this is one of the best ways that we found. And Fred, in his discussion, he agreed that this was pretty low hanging fruit and that it was a good way to continue our philosophy of operating. And then it allows us we basically in some ways don't want to get in the way of Murray and South Salt Lake, because hopefully still as we get closer, maybe some senators and employees will change and we can still make a run at this. But it sounded like our original philosophy, we talked to you about, well, we want to try and do everything we can with the legislature and then start doing other things. I think that plan was backwards. We probably need to start doing things so that we're similar. So then when they start, because they'll probably pull up the same list, do the exact same thing I did. And when they look at us, we're like this, like we haven't done anything. Where some of these other ones, they've, like Murray, they've done everything they can. They've implemented every tax. It's going to be a lot easier for Murray to go in and say, hey, we need this money. And I asked her, I'm like, so what are your plans? You have debt service. And she's like, well, we're getting ready to build a brand new city hall. And so I'm going to use this debt service to pay for it. So I'd sure like it to continue after 2030. And so it sounds like if by any chance we can get it to continue, that Murray and South Salt Lake are going to be our allies, but we kind of need to not stand in their way. And by doing a few of these things sooner than later, it's really going to help us. And then the other thing with some of these things is, as we've talked to you with like utility rates and stuff, we've always had the philosophy of trying to do increases slowly and methodically, not huge increases. So if we wait a long time, we run out of time to do those slow increases. So that's why we're bringing this to you now, is we'd like to start doing some of these things so that we can slowly phase them in, so we can look better to the legislature, and so that then we're making progress towards that 2030. So then instead of having it be a speed bump that we're going over 50 miles an hour, it's more of just Ritter Drive, a smooth, nice road. And so that's kind of where we're at. And as Fred alluded to, it's great because it diversifies our revenues. And talking to Larry again, he used the analogy of like years of plenty versus years of famine. And it's true. As we implement this, we will have, we should have some extra money. And we are going to have to safeguard some of that for these years that we're going to get to. But it will allow us to prepare. And the legislature, in talking to these other cities about the legislature currently, we're all very similar. They're scared to death if the legislature does anything with sales tax reallocation, and they've all heard the same thing we have, that they're looking at it. They're just waiting to show their cards still closer to the legislative session. They also talked about how the league really hasn't, back in the day, the operator of the league was Ken, and he was a lot more of a force to be reckoned with. Like, people were afraid of the league, or like, oh, can we get the league to buy off on this? Where Cameron Dill, he's not what Ken used to be. He's not gonna fight for us like some of the older people in the league did. And so by doing some of these things, we're just kind of helping ourselves. And so if we implemented today this sales tax, if you did the public hearing and voted for it, what those ordinances are is that it's an ordinance.
Not
and
sales tax, franchise tax, and energy tax, right?
Right, that's the official name, is like a municipal telecom and municipal energy tax. If we go forward with that public hearing and we implement these today, that ordinance is an agreement with the state tax commission, and it basically gives them the right to collect these taxes on behalf of us. And we actually pay them a small admin fee, just like we do with the sales tax, and then they remit it back to the city. Now we have to get it, I told you, Far West, they won't start collecting it until January. Part of the reason being is you have to get it to them 90 days before the first month of a quarter. So depending on if you did it tonight and we got everything signed into the state tax commission by January 1st, they would start collecting it for us probably April 1st. And so then going back to my other story, it would start April 1st, but then Rocky Mountain Power wouldn't bill their customers till May. So we wouldn't collect any money until the following fiscal year on this. And so that's why we're asking you more just to look at this and hopefully approve it, because we really feel like it's something the city needs, and it really fits our operating methodologies in every category. And then it will allow us then come February, March, April, May, when we start doing budget procedures, then we can start talking about like, okay, with the new council, what do we want to use this for? And honestly, the first year we're going to way underestimate because we have no idea what we're going to collect. You know, like I've done estimates. Fred's looked at them. He's like, yeah, that seems reasonable, but you know, we don't really know because we don't know what services are occurring. One other thing just to touch on, a lot of times with like our sales tax, it goes up. I would plan on this being fairly steady, but not increasing unless we have a lot of growth because of the changes in telecom. If you think of all the people who are going to solar, and just homes are getting more and more energy efficient all the time. So the amount that people are spending on those services is decreasing. And so it is a very stable revenue source because it's collected by the state tax commission and those kind of things. But it isn't one that we're going to get a lot of inflation on over time.
Geez, fire hose.
You wanted information.
That's what I'm talking about. We still have Bart with us?
Do you have any questions?
I just really appreciate all the work you've gone to
I
get
agree with
this
that.
and make us aware of this. You know, I'm on the mosquito board, and they just voted to give all the employees for Weber County a $2 an hour increase. I mean, we've got to do something to keep our staff. This is what makes our city successful, is the staff that we have here. So we need to be supportive of them.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Ms. Hanson and I attended a meeting last week, newly elected officials training, and they said, public safety, we're all aware of the upward pressures on them, but they said public works is our next big problem because we've got guys that are skilled in pipe fitting, electricians, heavy equipment operators, and with the building boom, I mean, those guys are going to be in super high demand. In fact, they said that it's already here. We didn't realize the pressure that's going to be on those guys next. So I just appreciate it. You hit all the high points. We do need to diversify, but any other questions? Mr. Stevens? Anything from you, Councilor Stevens? Anybody else? Okay. Let's see, Councilor Arnold?
I just have one concern, and it's your one comment you made in the other one, so you're probably prepared for this, but you said, if we get this revenue, we can use it to build parks, and I'm just like so against that. But being part of the council now, I mean, I have a say, but someday there's going to be another council, and so there's really no way to earmark it without a new council saying, well, we're going to go build a park with these funds. But I'm totally for doing this tonight, getting it rolling, doing it. But I would hope that the city staff would realize that I'm doing this for wages and need. And if we have a little extra, this hey, we're going to turn the 20 acres behind Sam's Club into a park is just not what I'm for. So I'm for moving forward with this tonight. And I'm saying, please
And
don't
we
squander it on a
recognize
park
that.
for Sean to take care of.
We're well aware of that, and that's the same concerns you have. We have. We've got to take care of our people first, or we're shooting ourselves in the foot. So obviously that's a very high priority for us. But we're in trouble. Riverdale's never been in this situation, and granted, our process will catch up a little bit after we have our survey, and it'll pull some of those salaries and stuff up. But some of these guys are going so high, I don't know that we can ever compete with them. But we've got to be up on the upper end. We're going to need money. I mean, it's just a fact of life. And since I've been here, we've kicked this can down the road I don't know how many times. We've known this was coming. And so it was refreshing to talk to Larry yesterday. I mean, we wanted to pick his brain because obviously if anybody knows about this, it was him. and we thought it was important that he saw where we were at. And by the end of that meeting, I felt really, really good. And I think Larry was very supportive with where we're going on this and what we're doing. And he recognized that too. He had same concerns. And so I think we're all on the same page, but until we know what's coming in and we sit down and start going over budgets, we're still kind of floating out there. So it's still going to be a while before we have a good handle on it. But we agree with you, Alan. We don't disagree with that at all. We're with you on it. So
We are gonna have to protect it because we need it, and so
I think those zeros are pretty glaring.
yeah,
I think they're pretty glaring on all the
Yeah.
charts. The Weber
are we
County
doing?
ones, the 5 cities with the local option. I think it's, pretty glaring difference. So that was the presentation. Any other comments on the presentation? Okay, with that, we would move to item number 6, and that would be a motion to move into a public hearing.
so moved.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor? Aye. Okay, any opposed? All right, the public hearing is now open.
You don't come until next week,
Yeah.
man.
She's still public tonight.
Guess I'm representing everyone.
The whole city.
But if people understood what it was, you would have a much fuller room right now. And that's the hard part. I mean, that was a great presentation, and that's a lot for anybody to take on. I've been thinking a lot of things as I reviewed the packet over the last week or so, trying to better understand where we're at financially. And of course, I've been hearing about the tax issues for a lot of years. I'm probably luckier than some of the other residents to have a better understanding and an inside track on what happened and where we're at as a city and where we're headed. I think the most important thing I would hope that the council would remember is that when that threat first came up, 16, 17 years ago, the staff worked really hard. And the council worked really hard on strategic planning, setting action items, following these plans, and made huge advances to save money and to protect the city. And so, although this appears very necessary, and it seems inevitable, it's going to have to happen, it's important that we plan for it, that we are able to go to the residents and say, we're not just taking this money and throwing it into what we're already doing and hoping it's going to save us. We've got a plan. And this is how it's going to help the city as we move forward. And to be able to show that we're still working on that strategic plan, building those action items and protecting those interests. So I think really I was worried about the timing. I understand it takes a little bit longer now to get the funds actually here, and you have the strategic planning come up in February, it sounds like. So there's some opportunity there to show that we've done our due diligence to protect this interest that we're going to receive from the residents and from the commercial. I do like that it spreads the burden. I think that was my biggest concern as I was looking at it, and from my basic understanding of franchise tax. I do worry, and maybe this is something that can be addressed by a future council. Where are we at market-wise with other cities when it comes to impact fees, to other areas where we should be pulling revenue, stormwater fees that may be lower than other, districts, especially for commercial, where we can make up some of those losses so that we're prepared. And I think there's a lot of opportunity, it sounds like, between now and 2030 for us to make good decisions, the council to make good decisions. And we have great staff that's shown that they're on board and able to make those changes that need to happen to keep the city being successful. So, I'm pretty hopeful. I think that we're headed in a good direction, and the timing's hard. It's never a great time to implement a new tax, I think, on anybody. But it's probably in the city's best interest, and I think it's inevitable. So I don't know that I speak for everybody when I'm in support of a new tax, but just knowing what I know and have been taught over the last 40 years, and at least the last 17 when it comes to sales tax and everything else that's going on, it sounds like it's in a good direction. And I think we just need to back it up with our actions and the city council's actions, and encouraging and guiding the staff on how to appropriately use that money in the future. So, thanks.
Thank you. Seeing no others, we need a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Thank you. All right. With that, we would move on to agenda item number 7, consideration of the ordinances. And will that be Cody as well? Or do you have anything else to add?
Not unless anybody has any questions for you. I probably talk too much, so.
Is there any other comments? Or
The language on these came from Far West, recent passage of these. This is language recommended from the state in the actual ordinance. The whereas clauses, we drafted those and things like that, but this should be what the state would want us to, how they'd want us to pass this. So we should be good in that regard as well.
And they're two separate ordinances,
That is
so we'll
correct,
do them
yeah.
one at a time.
Yes.
Are there any questions or comments on any of this? Counselor Ellis?
Move to approve ordinance 941, the municipal energy sales and use tax.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on those? Okay. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Nay.
Okay. That is 4 in favor and 1 opposed, so that motion carries. We have ordinance 942. We need a motion on that.
Go ahead, man, you're on a roll.
I move to approve ordinance 942, the municipal telecommunications license tax.
Second. Oh,
Oh, go ahead.
You
You
beat
can have
me.
it. I got the
a
last.
fraction of a second.
You can have it. In case it-
Motion
in case it
and
makes the paper.
2 seconds
How about a third?
and a third.
Yeah.
Okay, any discussion on that motion? Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Okay.
Are you nay?
No.
You can't.
Wired it's nay.
You already eyed.
I re-eyed.
Okay, so that is a 4 in favor and 1 opposed, so that passes as well. Thank you. We've already done agenda item H, so that means we need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right, we stand adjourned.
Use it wisely.
Good. I was scared she was gonna. They really need to stay